Word, dog. Word. Skirt. Skirt, skirt, skirt. Wow. Hey, guys. I'm Chase Smith. This is Nigel Robinson. You're listening to Hyperlink, a podcast journey. Today, we're going to continue to journey deeper into the creation narrative and hopefully find the rest in the chaos. So we hope you guys enjoy this episode, Rest in Creation.
Awesome. So we just came off of learning in the previous episode. The entire creation narrative is really God identifying first off as a worker, as a craftsman, but he's showing that and he's taking the signs and symbols that they know, and he's showing that he's so much more awesome than that.
Yeah.
He really is saying, hey, there's no battle. He spoke all that he created, including the sea monsters, those symbols of things that you're immensely afraid of. I spoke that. No big deal. Wasn't a battle. And God says, he called it good. And then at the end of that, he rested. Pretty crazy, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So, Chase happened to make us some delicious drinks.
I did. We love coffee, for those who are listening and love coffee. I was a barista for many, many years. Cheers.
Cheers.
I think this is pretty tasty. This is cold brew. It's a flash brew lemonade with lavender syrup. So basically, there's a recipe you can make. You can look it up, but it's an iced pour over with it's half cold brew or what comes out of that, which is flash brew, and then it's a pour over brewed over ice, directly over ice.
Delicious.
Which, fun fact, it actually the ice causes the molecules of the coffee to bloom more, and you actually get more flavor out of it. So
that is true.
And then you do half lemonade, fresh lemonade, as close to fresh lemonade as you can, still sweetened. But then you add lavender syrup. It's delicious because lavender goes well with lemon. Lemon goes well with coffee. You put them all together. God, it's delicious.
Delicious. So thank the maker.
Yeah, fun expression of creating things as co-creators.
Yeah. So, today we're gonna take a little deeper dive though, into the literary structure of Genesis 1. And, we're really gonna talk about how all that points to a buried treasure. Kind of like a pirate map, right?
Like a pirate?
Yeah, I think
this kind of pirate?
Just like that kind of.
Oh, that kind of pirate. We like coffee. Buried treasure is all in the coffee, mate.
Chase is a man of many talents. That is one of them, and I couldn't wait to exploit that at some point in time.
I grew up in a family who loved. We didn't know how to say things that were serious, so we would always use movie quotes and voices to communicate something that was harsh or could be harsh. And if you used a voice, you could say the same thing in a different voice, and it would be more easily received. Because
wow,
yeah, I don't think I've ever shared that.
Yeah, I didn't know that. So we're learning all at the same time.
Yeah,
that's awesome. So well, let's dive in. Cool. All right. So I'll point out a couple things before we go into the text again. Number one, Genesis 1 through 2, but the beginning parts of 2, the day 7 days of creation is a poem. Yes, it's a poem.
Yeah.
I'm not saying it didn't happen the way it reads. I'm just saying that this form of literature is a poem. You want proof? Cool. It sets up in stanzas. You've noticed the stanzas yourself. And it rhymes. What are literary rhymes, you might ask? It's not like a rapping rhyme, but they're patterns. Literary rhymes all over this thing. So we'll talk about some of the patterns real quick. Patterns of 3. We actually alluded and talked a little bit about this in the last episode, didn't we not?
Yeah.
3ness. Creator God has 3 parts: creator, spirit, and word, right? The word creator appears 3 times, 3 different places. Actually, it appears more than 3 times, but in 3 different places. The beginning, the middle, and the end. Who would have thought? And at the end, it appears 3 times in rapid fire. Boom, boom, boom. Just a few verses. He called, it says the word says he called 3 times. He does 3 things: order, fills, and calls. And there's 3 days of separation and mixed with 3 days of filling. We talked about that last week as well, last episode. Now, there's also patterns of 7, especially seen in the Hebrew. So in the original language, what you'll find is the first verse has 7 words. The second verse has 14 words with, earth is used 21 times. 35 words in the 7th verse specifically. Elohim, that Hebrew word is mentioned 35 times. It was so is mentioned 7 times, and God saw is mentioned 7 times. And wouldn't you know that the word good or tov is mentioned 7 times?
Even though he didn't use good on every day.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Exactly. He didn't use it on 2 of those days.
Sounds intentional.
And if there's a pattern of 3 and there's a pattern of 7, can we expect another number pattern to emerge?
Yeah, why not?
Why not? 3 plus 7 is?
10.
Math nerds. He was homeschooled, guys.
Thank you.
All right, so patterns of 10. It says to make 10 times, according to its kind 10 times, and God said 10 times. Actually, 3 times it says God said is in reference to people. 7 times is in reference to creation. 3 and 7 again. Also, and let there be 10 times. 3 times in reference to the heavens, and 7 times in reference to things on earth. Interesting.
So 3 for heaven and 7 for earth.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's
3 in the Jewish mind typically denotes or symbolizes God. 7 is perfection. Not. I joke. That's what we always heard. It's fake. Completion. Not perfection. It's completed.
Which, depending on your definition of perfect, I think we should build our definition of perfect off of completion. So
good.
Yeah.
Wow. So this is not only a poem. Look at that. Like, that is insane creativity. This is like extra, above, beyond. This is crazy, right? So this is, so number 2 thing is this book, this verse, chapter 1 is literary genius. Like, we will explore that much more, but it is literary genius, guys. The authors of the Bible are exceptional. And 3 is a new tool we're going to talk about. One thing we want to mention as tools to find treasure in the biblical narrative is asking questions like, what stands out? What seems odd? What is weird? And so typically, when we read, especially familiar verses, we overlook some of the weird things, some of the unique things about this verse that could stand out to a person who's maybe read it or heard it for the first time. So, Chase, in the creation narrative, what are some things that stand out or weird or seem odd to you? Feel free to look at it, but what are some things?
I mean, I think the repetitive nature is definitely, I mean, I know we're talking about numbers, but like it just kind of says the same thing over and over. It's like it's repeating itself. It's like, hey, you already said that. Like, I know I'm not like a writer, but I very much enjoy writing. I'm a decent writer. I loved English class, which is weird. I learned to like English class, and so I really enjoy writing. I love thought. And so when I write, I try to give diversity, and like, I don't use the same word for the same thing, like, so because it sounds like it flows better. This, if you're reading it from that perspective, it's like disjointed, not just jointed, but like repetitive. So like, like a song,
almost monotonous, or like a song or a poem. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you think that these words are so repetitive, though? What do you think the author or God could be trying to convey, and what is that going to mean moving forward in the entire meta narrative of the Bible?
This tells me that patterns are important. I know that the numbers or numerology, like that, the numerical repetitiveness is important. I don't know what it denotes necessarily, like, but I feel like the author's trying to say something specific.
Yeah, of course.
So
yeah, and I think what you said is the patterns, and also it's again, this is the beginning of a nation. Israel is learning to become a nation. They're building their own language. Like, we have a language as a nation. I'm not talking about English. Like, we have a language in how we live. 8-hour work days. That's part of the language of America, right?
Oh, yeah.
Or 5 days of work, 2 days off, right? There's a language and a rhythm and a rhyme of what we do. And he's starting to build a language for the narrative of the entirety of the Bible, right?
Yeah.
So some of those words you'll see over, some of those numbers you'll see over again multiple times on purpose. Think about it. 10. There's 7 days of creation, obviously, but there's 10. There's 10 commandments, right?
Yeah.
Like, why wasn't it 11? Why wasn't it 9? 10. Like, obviously that's on purpose. It's call back to things and it's calling forward to things. And so, that's a lot of what is going on as well. Now, in the overall, outside of the patterns, what are some things that might stand out to you, Chase? Like, in the actual narrative and besides that, what are some things that might stand out? Anything? The creation story. Oh, Genesis 1 creation story.
Yeah, I was trying to think of hard examples, but
That's fine. God calls the world good.
Yeah, he like creates it, and then he's like, "It's good."
Yeah, why does he keep calling it good?
Yeah.
What do you think the world is good? Like, growing up, are we taught the world is good?
No, not at all.
Yeah, right?
Like, there's no one good but God. Like, that's what we're taught, and so
Yeah.
you don't use that for anything but God. Which,
Yeah.
I understand the concept, but since Christ has come, he literally calls us the light of the world, which we only give that title to Jesus, but he gave that title to us. So anyway, I digress.
There's so much. Yeah. I think God these are Israelites who have been in bondage for 400 years plus. There they are. And God is saying the world has been crazy and it's been harsh to you probably, but I created the world good. And if you join in with me, it can be good again. I think that's a big part of that, but it stands out. If we just overlook it because we've read it a million times, you might miss something, right? So we'll journey deeper into why God calls things good in actually the next episode. Super fun. I don't want to spoil it, but I want to give the time necessary for today's and the time necessary for next week's as well. So so rest in the middle of a creation story, right? So if you start in Genesis chapter 2 and you read the first few chapters, Chase, if you want to open up the Bible and read the first couple verses of Genesis chapter 2, the day 7 essentially is where it ends. Go ahead.
Yeah. You just tell me when to stop.
Yeah, just read go.
Thus the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day, God finished his work that he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work that he had done. So God blessed the 7th day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Think about that. How many times we just talked about patterns? Rested is used quite a bit in those small amount of verses.
Yeah.
It's like there's a reason for that. Like, why would there be that much rest in a story of a creator God, a carver, a workman God? Like, we should pay attention to that. That's the language we should pay attention to. It's weird to have a story of a creator and then have an entire day where rest is the sole focus. Would you agree?
Yes.
Yeah, isn't that kind of weird? It's the story of creation, but there's a day where nothing's created and nothing's going on.
Yeah. It's also, well, other pattern, but verse 2 starts with the 7th day, but like it's about to backtrack. It's about to go, okay, well, but earlier,
yeah,
this is the detail.
Yeah,
but here's the account, and then now we're gonna go focus on like the day 6. But the point is, it ends on rest.
Mm-hmm.
Man is introduced into a world that is already made and ready, kind of like what he said he's gonna do before he returns. And then he introduces us into a finished, completed work. And the first thing that we're supposed to do is rest.
Okay. I didn't even think about that. So, So what I'm hearing you say is God created everything. We're created on day 6. Man and woman in his image. He created them both male and female. Boom. Day 6. Day 7, God's like, rest. And so obviously man should rest because God's resting. Mm-hmm. Like, what else? God didn't give man anything else to do yet. That happens later in chapter 2. Rest, relax. I love that. That is amazing. Honestly, like, so think about the first people again. Israelites, bondage, slavery, 400 years. Do you think they understood a concept of true rest?
No. It's important to note. Actually, I don't know. I was taught that they were still given their day of rest and their feasts and their festivals at that point. There weren't feasts and festivals at that point, but were they given the day of rest on the seventh day at that point?
I mean, typically, yeah, they probably worked 6 days. They were grueling long days. Sometimes they might have worked 7. Obviously, peak season. They were slaves, but they did work gruelingly for those 14, 15-hour days. So yeah, I think that rest is something that they didn't fully grasp because it had been so long,
Yes, of course.
But
yeah,
I do
overall
think
as a concept.
I do. I mean, I don't believe from what I've gathered historically speaking, they didn't. Egypt wasn't like work 12, 17, 18 days straight. They were just like they did work 6-day work weeks, but they were long work weeks.
Yeah,
and they were harsh conditions.
Right.
And one day is sometimes not enough in our American comfortable conditions to rest, let alone.
And if anything, the only reason why they were probably given a rest day in the first place was a place of bondage, which is if you don't give these guys a chance to rest, we're going to lose slaves because they're going to die. It was very much less about taking care of people and more about making sure that their assets of people did not diminish.
Yes, and it's also important to note that the entire community did not get the same day of rest. There was always work being done, but you might get Tuesday off, someone else might get Wednesday off, someone else might get Thursday off. Huh. Like they because they were going to continue to work. The work was not going to stop all on one day. We have that typical in America, probably Sunday, the least amount of people work. More people work Monday through Saturday than Sunday. More people work Monday through Friday than Saturday and Sunday, but Sunday is probably the day where we work the least as a community.
Yeah.
Because it's the rhythm, it's kind of the language of America.
Yeah.
However, they would have probably gotten days, but they would have gotten them separated because they wanted to make sure they had the work. The work always was getting done, right? Part of being a slave. You don't choose your times of days off.
No.
But anyway, let's look more closely at what we call chiasms. Now, we talked about chiasms in a previous episode. So if you, don't know what they are, please go back to that episode, and I think it's episode 2 or 3, what we did. But yeah, please go back to that episode and,
groundwork.
One of the groundwork episodes, and you'll get some of that. But, we'll dive in a little bit. Obviously, you can follow along if you can. If you're smart, you might be able to pick it up anyway. But more closely at the structure, there were multiple chiasms in this story. It's incredible. In the first chapter of Genesis through day 7, the first 7 days, there are multiple chiasms. It's amazing. So what you have is what you have is you have the light and darkness are day 1. You have water and sky day 2. You have land and seas day 3. Okay. And then you have sun and moon day 4, fish and birds day 5, animals and humans day 6, and day 7 he rested. So day 1 and day 4 are connected.
Yeah.
Like day 1 and day 4, like day 4 feels what day 1 separated. Day 1, there's light and there's darkness. And day 4, there's sun and their moon and the stars. That is what we see as like that. That's the thing. Like it connects to that one. Day 2, there's waters above and waters below. Day 5, fish and birds go in the sky and in the water, right? Mm-hmm. Like fish go in the water and birds go in the sky. Like where he separated them, he's feeling what he separated. Day 3, it says he created land and seas. And day 6, there's animals to fill the land and the seas. That's what God does. And humans are brought in on day 6 as well. So we've said it before, but day 1 through 3, God separates order and chaos. Day 4 through 6, he feels what he separated.
Yeah.
So that is the picture of our life. We talked about that last episode. Chaos, and then order, and then calls and gives purpose to what he just brought order to our lives, right? But let's go back to the chiasm here, because there's multiple. So the best way to find a chiasm, or a simplest way, is to find the bookends. So what are the bookends?
In creation, the creation story?
In the creation narrative, yeah. The poem of Genesis 1, what are the bookends? It goes from close. It's actually, it starts off with, the earth was formless and void, chaotic nothingness.
Okay, yeah.
And then God rested. He did nothing. Nothing is done on day 7, and nothing is, and there's chaotic nothingness beforehand.
Okay.
Now, if that's a stretch for some of you, you're like, oh, I don't know if I see that. Maybe it goes where God started the work and God ended the work. Bookends.
Yes.
Started, ended. Boom. Either way, the bookends are the exact same. However you want to look at it, why. So there are 2 chiasms on top of each other inside of the poem itself, and then there's multiple outside of those 2. But here you go. You have the chiasm 1. We're going to call it the literary structure or structural chiasm. So what that means is that you have a structure. So you have, it's the way it's written. It's the number of words and paragraphs it's utilizing. So you have like a baby paragraph on day 1. Day 2, you have this mama paragraph. Day 3, you have this daddy paragraph. It's a larger day. And Chase, you talked about, why does it keep repeating itself?
Yeah.
It's establishing a structure.
Mm-hmm.
So then day 4, it's another large paragraph, daddy paragraph. Day 5 is a mama paragraph, another kind of medium-sized paragraph. And then day 6 would or should be, according to the structure, a baby paragraph, but instead something stands out. Do you know what that is?
It changes pattern.
Changes patterns on purpose.
Yeah.
And we'll get to that in a second, but that is the first literary structure. So day 1, 2, and 3, and then you have 3, and then you have 4, 5, and 6. So it goes A, B, C, C, B, A. If you want to look at like the way it works, and it goes A, B, C, points right here, C, B, A. So it kind of points to this middle between the 2 C's, the 2 paragraphs. Now, there's more, because there's a second chiasm on top of that one, and it's the content structure, which we just kind of talked about. Light and dark,
Yeah.
sun and moon. That's A and A. Water and skies, birds and fish, right? B and B. And then you have a man and animals, and you have land and sea, C and C, right? C is in the letter this time. But what you have is, you have all those together. So it's an ABC chiasm in that one. It's not an ABCCBA. It's ABC.
Yeah.
So in the same verses, you have 2 chiasms.
Yeah. Which is wild.
Thank you. Like, can we take a moment?
That's very creative of the writer.
Like, we should be in awe of how amazing this is. Like, the Bible is literally the best piece of literature that's ever been put together. I'm serious. Like Homer has nothing. J.K. Rowling's, J.R. Tolkien, right? Frank Herbert.
And they're good.
They're great.
But
they have nothing on the masterpiece that is the Bible.
Yeah.
And this is over 66 books across thousands of years. And it's no less amazing in the New Testament. In fact, John may be one of the most brilliant writers in the history of the world. Matthew, Mark, Luke, Paul, like, they're not slacks either, right? Like, it's incredible.
Yeah.
But this is the art to what God is putting together. The words, there is intention, there is design. It's as if God truly is the author and the finisher of the story. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, fanboying done.
Yeah. Well, and it says, like, that alludes to the scripture of, like, the author and perfecter of our faith. The author and what? The completer. That's a very different connotation, by the way. The author, the one who writes our faith, the one who starts it, and the one who completes it. Which is what he's doing.
Yeah. I think
creation,
we've heard that so many times as Christians that grew up in the church. Author and finisher of our faith, blah, blah, author and perfecter of our faith, blah, blah, blah. Maybe we can import some different words using our thesaurus.
Yeah.
The founder and the finisher.
Yeah.
Like the one who founded everything and the one who finishes everything.
Yeah.
The Alpha, the Omega, right? Oof. I know, man.
The Aleph and Tav.
So now that we see these 2 chiasms, let's look for the treasure. Where would it be? Day 4. It is the middle of both the chiasms, day 4. If you can count, and you're like, well, why isn't it okay, so you have A, B, C, C, B, A. Why isn't it in the middle? Why does it start on day 4? I mean, you can ask a lot of questions, but if you look at the Hebrew words, there is actually one word that lies dead in the center of the entire Genesis 1 poem. One word. Now, obviously, we're not in the English. We have different words. Sometimes they have one word where we have 3 words, so it doesn't quite work the same. But in the Hebrew, there is one word that lies dead in the center. Chase, do you know what that word is?
I don't think I actually know. I was going to take a guess.
Take a guess. Take a guess.
A gander.
I was going to say that, but gander means look, which makes no sense.
It's like a propaganda. Not propaganda, but proper gander.
As you gander at the Bible, take a guess.
As you gaze. I was going to say light. But, is it signs?
Close. It's the seasons, the times.
Signs and for seasons.
Seasons. That Hebrew word is, I might say it wrong. Chase can correct me.
Go ahead.
No, you can say it.
I actually don't. You don't say it, I'll correct you.
I think it's pronounced Moed.
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
okay.
Moed.
Moed. Awesome. So, Moed is used throughout the whole of the scriptures. This is the first time we see it, though. And it's kind of, we translate it like sacred times, sometimes Sabbath, seasons. So what you're seeing is let's ask this question, Chase. Why would this be the treasure in the Genesis creation narrative?
I think what comes to my mind anyway is that it's like a remembrance
of
what, not only what God's doing, what's a remembrance of what God's doing. Like these shall be signs and seasons, and like they are they call to remembrance. That's what feasts and festivals were.
Yeah.
They were holidays, like we have holidays.
Yeah.
To commemorate, like we don't just remember that Jesus died for our sins, like on Easter, which is really just Resurrection Sunday. Anyway, get into that later. But like, or, Christmas, like, for those of us who celebrate Christmas, its original origins of like Jesus' birth, which is not when he was born in the world, but I digress. But like we take the day to remember something that we hopefully remember throughout our lives, not just one day out of the year.
Yes.
It's just giving thanks. We're not thankful one day out of the year. So they are called to signs and remembrances so that we can.
I love that. Yeah. I love that.
Which is a part of worship, to gaze upon.
Yeah. And then
what you give your attention.
And they learned about their proper feasts and festivals in the Torah, right? Later on.
Yes.
And when they learn about it, do you remember what the first one is? The first thing mentioned?
First one mentioned?
Sabbath.
Sabbath. Okay. Yes.
Which is weekly.
Yes. Most feasts and festivals are annually.
Yeah.
But that is the one that remains true every 7 days.
Weekly.
No matter what.
And the story ends with God showing us what a Sabbath is.
Mm-hmm.
Again, who's the original audience, right? Israel at Mount Sinai. Where did they come from? For hundreds of years, 6 long work days. We talked about that. Do you think that their identity could have been in how much they can produce?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think they could have found their value in what they do?
Yeah, what they work. I mean, we talked about it last episode. Like they got nervous. They were sitting there waiting for Moses, and they had to put their hands to work to make a calf.
Yes.
They couldn't rest.
Exactly. Their identity.
Almost 40 days off.
40 years. No, their identity was tied to how much they could make and maybe even how oppressed they are, right?
Yeah.
Maybe their identity was tied to that. Imagine, you have these former slaves about to become a nation. You said, do you want to speak to something? With your identity tied into how oppressed they are?
Uh-huh.
Go ahead.
Sounds familiar for modern day.
Well, it does, right?
Yeah. Like how often are we defined today in today's culture by what people think about us, and it's a negative connotation.
Exactly.
You think this about me, whine, complain, and then you build your identity and who you are and your belief system, or even your religion, however you want to formulate that word. Your scientific belief, you form it from a place of lack.
Yes.
Which is what the Satan wants us to do.
And you said a word. You said, you built. Who's the original builder?
God.
In the principle, I don't call it a law, but the principle first mentioned, God's the builder.
Yeah.
We are not.
Well, and what happens when we build stuff? Even the temple, when Jesus said, not one stone will be laid upon, not one stone will be on top of another when this is done.
Let's go.
Because what man builds, God cannot be contained within it.
Exactly. Like, That is key, man.
Yeah.
Even when they were building in the ancient times, and they had to build, when God would call them to build, altars, he said that you find stones around. Like, don't carve and change it.
Yeah.
Find the stones to build to make it. But like,
Yeah.
you can't change it. Like, you have, like, it needs to be what I built, and you're just kind of ordering it.
Yeah.
Which again is so good. Like, I'm telling you, like, there's so much here in how we can be caught in oppression or feel like we're caught in oppression when in reality God's like, and we're trying to build this better life for us. We're trying to work hard so they can see us differently. And God's like, yo, like, no, like, I built it and I built you, and you're good. Yeah. And it's good. And it's time to rest. And so we're gonna keep moving, but like, oh, so good. So, these go ahead.
Finish that. The reason why, like, God is living and dwells inside us, he chose us to be the indweller of his spirit because he built us. You kind of
exactly.
But like, God cannot be contained in the temple. You can't go to church on a Sunday morning. He's not there. He's not dwelling. Is he there? Yes. Is that where he dwells and chooses to be his home? No, it's a building that we built. It's nothing special. They adorned the temple, Solomon's temple, like with gold, like the finest of the finest of the finest, and it still could not contain God. It was only done so, and it was filled with the treasure because it was to denote a physical representation of a spiritual reality.
Yes.
So if a temple is going to be that precious, how much more are we precious?
Yes.
And what we're made of is more precious.
And we're getting ahead of the story of where we're going to go. But no, it's beautiful because it's exactly what's going on. So the identity, again, of these slaves, they're about to become a nation. Like, they only knew one speed, like, go work, create, build, oppression. Yet this God gives them a story saying, I am the creator. I am the carver. Just like you, I work with my hands, working, doing, and in the center, the treasure of God's work is rest, is Sabbath, is Moed, is sacred times, is stopping and remembering who they are, who God is, well, who God says they are, and who God is.
You know what that made me think of? Okay, if you think of, I don't know how to word this specifically, but I'll try and get it out. Verbal processor. At the center of the chiasm is the treasure, and that treasure is rest. This is a story about creation, and it's about the story of creation, and it goes back into, just after this part, this chiasm goes into the details of man's creation, right? So if at the center of this, the treasure is rest, then God chooses in us to dwell, and at the center, he places the treasure, and we are to live and our core being from a place of rest, because that is at the center of who we are, should be.
Yes. Love it. Love it. And we talked about the structural chiasm and how it breaks structure at the end on day 6. It breaks rhyme. So this is like, you gotta take special note here, because this is like a poem when it's rhyming, and then it stops rhyming on purpose. But instead, like, think about it like a modern day language. This is the bridge of the song. This is where the drummer cuts to cut tempo, and it changes everything, right? Yeah. Goes cut tempo. This is that moment. This is the moment. What it signifies, man is valued, not because of one thing they did. Because they had not, in the story, they have not done a single thing. But because God says so.
Yeah.
He says, Imago Dei. In the image of God, he created them, male and female. We are image bearers of the God, of Yahweh, of the ultimate creator. God is telling the Israelites, right? You now do not live as slaves. Take breaks. Understand, you live from a place of value, not lack of value or devalue.
Yeah.
And that theme of valuing people and devaluing people, this is another major theme emerging in the story. Right?
Yeah.
And we will soon see how much Cain values Abel. Valuing people is when we're like God. devaluing people, not much like God. How much does Lot value Abram? How much did Joseph's brothers value him? How much did Saul value David? How much did David value Saul? How much did the Israelites value the other nations, right? Like these themes are throughout they permeate the scriptures. The Sermon on the Mount is really about how we treat people, how we value each other. Paul speaks of how to treat others in Ephesians, right? Slaves and masters, wives, husbands, valuing is the key. The idea that man being valued, the idea that all men are created equal, that started right here.
Yeah.
And sometimes we can get there without knowing the treasure, because it's sometimes just obvious. But that treasure is that key, that the God, we're so valued that we can rest.
Yeah. That, I don't know. If that doesn't rock your boat, like, and change your identity, like that is, I think that is the building blocks of like foundational belief, because identity is so key in accepting who God is and who we are in Him.
Yes. Sorry, I didn't want to cut you off. Yes. Yes. See, last week or last episode, we talked about how, like, the identity of God, like God was identifying, or he was he was emerging who he really is.
Yeah.
And now, in the creation story, in Genesis 1, but now we're talking about the identity of man in the same story. God is able to show and teach us who he really is, and change our worldview of him, change a proper biblical view of who he is. And he's able to give us who we really are in literally the same verses.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, this Bible is incredible.
Yeah.
Fall in love with the Word of God. It will change you and your life and those around you. But guess what? There's more. There's more. What if I told you the creation poem parallels the Israelites' times in Israel?
It's funny. I was about to get there.
Okay, tell me.
Well, I was going to say, it's interesting that the first thing that we're introduced to is like, so this story is being introduced to the Israelites in a context where they're finally in the desert, right? So they're getting this, it's written down and they're finally starting to read it. And what they can do is they can call back, because before this is being written down, in Egypt, they're being introduced to the God, their maker, by the works that he does, which is the 10 plagues of Egypt. What does Israel do? Nothing. They have no inclusivity except to be gazers upon the works of what God does, and all they have to do is sit back and watch him do it.
Amen.
That's their intro to God.
Yes. It gets deeper though, because there's a themes that are the same. God is creator, right? Craftsman. We talked about that last episode. He's as a carver. It's a blue collar word. Slaves, labor, craftsman. God built the world. Israelite in Egypt, they were the labor force that helped build Egypt. They helped build the cities, the houses. Man is valued in Genesis chapter 1. It says that God knelt. The word is knelt to work and make him, right? He knelt down. In fact, it's also so often used as blessed. Whew. Like God blessed and knelt at the same time. It's incredible. But being rescued from slaves rescued by God, that would give them value. That would show them how valuable they actually are. God came down to save them. And then God rested. The Israelites, did they rest in the wilderness? They were invited to. Sometimes they did. Sometimes they didn't. But the thing is, who feeds them?
Yeah, God takes care of them.
The whole time. He guides them. They don't have to think about where they're going. They don't have to worry about food.
There's no planting of crops.
There's a rock that follows them that just spews out water.
Yeah.
They don't have to do anything but just obey.
Yeah.
Relax. Rest. And it's hard for them because they're not used to it. See, man is made in the image of God. Israel's story in Egypt parallels the poem so well. And at the end of the story, what was next for Israel? To join God in rest.
It's like God, It's like God made a table, set the table, and he says, come sit with me. And we can be like, why? Like, I didn't help with dinner. I didn't help make this meal. And it doesn't matter. Show up. I'm going to have a dinner party. Show up. All you got to do is eat my food and leave. Well, not leave, but in the dinner party reference, it's like he invites us into what he is doing, which he's God of the universe. Like, why would he do that? That concept for me blows my mind, where it's like, hey, I've made this for you and I don't want anything from you.
Yeah. Think about, Mary and Martha. Martha's going and doing and doing and doing, and Mary is sitting at the feet of Jesus. And we all want to be Marys. We all praise Mary. And I'm not saying Martha was doing anything wrong, because honestly, like, Martha, like, doing the work is so important.
Yeah.
And like, there's things to get done. There's just stuff to get done. But what did Jesus say? He didn't say that Martha chose the wrong thing. He said that Mary chose what was better.
Yeah.
Like, just rest. That has been the invitation. And guess what? There's more. Because there's many chiasms inside the larger chiasm. If you remember from the chiasm when we talked about rings within rings, chiasms within chiasms, for larger chiastic stories, there's chiasms inside of chiasms. This isn't that large, but there's still that, because the author is so intentional. God is so good. The Bible is so amazing. Day 1 through day 3 is a miniature chiasm, and it points to day 2. What stands out in day 2? Not called good.
Yeah.
No creation in day 2. Just separating of waters above and below. So what's the treasure there? God has control over the chaos you fear, the waters, and the waters you need. Because the waters above are the good ones. It's the rain.
Mm-hmm.
Fear not. He is your provider, and he's also your protector. Right there. Middle of day 4 through 6, mini chiasm. Middle of day 4, day 4 through 6. What's weird or odd about day 5? Sea monsters. Tanin.
Mm-hmm.
God created the sea monsters you fear, the great serpent, the symbol of the Satan, of Tiamat, and he called it good.
Yeah.
Why do we find ourselves running and striving as humans? To beat chaos. Like, to distill it down, to give chaos what it needs to be pacified. I say chaos, but to give, like, God is telling this group, yeah, no, I got all that. You just need to rest in me. We don't rest because whenever we see I keep using the word chaos, but we are running and working to keep chaos at bay.
Yeah.
Like, if we don't work, we're like, oh, we're not going to be able to pay for our house and our cars. Or if we don't work, we're not going to be able to eat. Or if we don't build and produce, we're not going to be valuable to society and they're not going to care. Like, we're trying to keep chaos at bay. We're trying to pacify it. And God's like, I did that already. And he's telling this group, I got it.
Yeah, so many times in our lives, day to day, we are our temptation, I think, daily is to do the work that God's already done. And because if we truly trusted him, that he's a provider and the author, perfecter, the completer of our faith, if he's actually who he says he is, and we trust him at that level, we can find that rest. But there is still something in us, like the children of Israel, that says, I have to work for this thing. And this is the message of Jesus, which is he shows up, he pays for it all, and he says, you don't have to do a thing. Just look at me.
We oftentimes, without knowing it, work to appease God.
Yeah.
We work to get something good from life. We might call it life. We might call it, like I said, we work to keep chaos at bay. We're offering up time and energy and mental thoughts and planning sessions to do that. And it is planning bad? No. Is working bad? No. But if we're doing it to appease chaos or to appease God, like we're off. We just do it, like Paul says, do everything unto the Lord. We just do it because we're working unto the Lord. We're resting in Him. We're just like, hey, like you did something, I'm doing something. I want to be like you. I want to be like you, God. You create. I want to be like you. So this is what I'm gonna do, right? Question is, do we see the world? Why do we not rest? Like, why is it so hard for us to do that? And I think it goes back to how we see the world. Is it good?
It depends on how you look at it.
Exactly.
With a good or a bad eye.
Ayin tova, right? Ayin raha. Is that right? You can say it better. Anyway, it's the Hebrew for like a good eye and a bad eye, a eye of abundance and an eye of lack. See, God is in control, or is He? Do we even see God as God, or do we see God as a moral standard to attain? Like, we know He's morally good, but do we see Him as the all-powerful, all-sufficient provider, protector, ever-present help in times of need, my strong tower? Like, is He that? Is He king? Or is He just the moral standard to try to attain so we can get to heaven? Because if you see Him as that, then the world is hard.
Yeah.
Because the moral standard is hard.
Yeah.
And the world's harsh and it's tough. But if you see Him as the opposite, if you see Him as King of Kings, and He says the world is good, we say the world is good. He's king. He decrees it good. I decree it good. Good is used 7 times again in this creation poem. 7 is the number of completion, meaning the world is completely good. After the fall, guess what? The world was not automatically bad. The narrative doesn't say that, and we're not there, but we'll get there. We cannot import our doctrines or beliefs where they're not there. Like we can't. Like, it doesn't say the world descended into crazy chaos and then everything was all of a sudden terrible. And we'll get there. But the world, man, God's created a good world. Do you have faith in Him enough to know that He can still keep a good world going?
Yeah. Even when chaos remains.
Yes. Chaos was part of the creation.
Yeah.
A little bit. Like the things that symbolize chaos. They're there. They're still there. Like, God didn't get rid of darkness. Darkness was just a part of creation. It's a part of the rhythm of creation.
Yeah.
Anyway, there might be more, but I found about 4 chiasms in the creation narrative, right? And telling us some more truth than how the world was made. The facts are there, but the truth is deeper. This is how we are to think. Not just what to think. This is teaching us how to think. So did you notice how this narrative mentioned evening and morning as a day? Evening and morning?
Yeah. Which doesn't feel like a full day, but it's afternoon.
It starts with the evening and then it goes to the morning, right?
Yes.
As in, like, why why do we start our days in the morning and God starts His day in the evening? Is that relevant, Chase?
Yeah, because at least I would say the sun sets and you sleep. You rest. Your day starts with rest. Because you wake up in the morning and you living that day, the rest of the day, from a place of rest.
In a culture where it's rise and grind, this American culture we live in. We live in America. This American culture we live in, rise and grind culture. The second half of our day is rest. We rise and grind, and I've even heard people say, like, work hard so that way, like, you can fall asleep well knowing you did a good job. So it's like working is first and sleeping secondary.
Yeah, right.
Resting is secondary.
Yeah, the sleeping and the resting and the time off is your reward for the work you did. That's the way that we live our lives.
It sounds like what you said, and I agree with you, but it sounds like, if I had to rephrase that like, our value is in what we do. Therefore, when we do good, we get rewarded with rest and vacation.
Yeah.
But the treasure was sacred times. The treasure was Sabbath. The treasure was actually, that's the most important part. And the day starts with rest. And because we are rested, we can now work in him.
Yeah. Exactly.
Read the same, read day 7, the last few again.
Chapter 2.
Yeah.
So God blessed the seventh day and made it holy, because on it God rested from all his work that he had done in creation.
Awesome.
So it sounds like what we try to do is replace God with ourselves. And we're trying to take over God's job.
Is that not the temptation of the garden?
Yeah, it is to be like him. It's to be, which we already are, but the deception is that we are not partners, but we are God. God calls us into his space to be with him.
I agree.
But not to take over his job. It is to fulfill our place and position that he has made for us to set the table. We take that seat. But when we take him off the throne and we put ourselves on it, that's the temptation. And then we wonder why we're not enough. Why it's not enough. Because we make bad kings.
We'll get there in a couple weeks, couple sessions. I mean, we're getting to the fall, but
in the right context, we make great kings. So we aren't called to be a royal priesthood. But
no, yeah, and we'll get there. It's so good, Chase. I mean, the thing is, I keep saying all of it is found, and it all is alluding to the future on purpose.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about, the themes. But here's the kicker. He just read the end of it. The seventh day, there's no evening or morning. The seventh day, as far as we know, still going.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up.
There's no stopping. Rest, like God is inviting us to rest forever.
Yeah.
Like there's no stopping. Like he didn't say evening and morning, and now we're starting back over day 1 where we're all working hard.
Yeah.
It's just, and God rested and saw that it was good, and it's good.
Yeah.
And we're done, and that's what he created. It's as if the author is intentionally, of this poem is intentionally inviting us to think differently. Rest is where God leaves this poem. It's like whenever you finish a song, and we're both musicians of sorts, but we are. But whenever you finish a song in an unresolved chord, like a whole time, evening and morning was the first day, evening and morning was the second day. We're getting to day 7. Blah blah blah. All the days have evening and morning, and then you have day 7, and you unresolve it. You're just like, why linger in that concept?
Yeah.
Be still and know, like linger in that concept, right? There's rest God has for you, a rest from working to find value from him and people. There's a rest from striving to overcome the craziness of the world. There's a rest, a peace offered in the work of creation. God shows a template on how to live.
Yeah.
And rest is key. So, I mean, practically take a Sabbath. I encourage you every 7 days. Like, this is not a law. That wasn't a law. I mean, the Jewish people might have made it a law, but it wasn't a law as much as it was. God was teaching them how to live. It was a new worldview.
Yeah.
And especially here in creation, it's a worldview. It's a shift. Rest. Sabbath. I encourage that for everybody who's listening. Sabbath. Find time. And in resting, you reflect. As you talked about sacred times, the feast, they were for reflecting on what God had done, what he's going to do, those kind of things. Reflect on God and who he is. Reflect on who God has called you to be. Reflect on your value in him. Enjoy your day. Like, that is how you Sabbath. Any thoughts, Chase, before we wrap up?
Yeah. So going back to like the signs, like the center of that chiasm, that treasure, like the Sabbath is just like the annual feasts, right? The annual feasts are to remember on a daily basis, but commemorate, so memory one at least, so we do not forget. And there's time leading up to that holiday and the time lingering after that holiday, and then all the time in between. And so the Sabbath happens weekly. The Sabbath is a day that we rest. Our bodies need physical rest. Our bodies are they have limitations. They have a need for energy output and energy input. And we get that by putting work out and then resting in. And so, but that is a physical representation of what we are to do spiritually at all times. So that even though we take that physical rest in our bodies every 7 days, it is to still commemorate a rhythm that we need reminding of once a week, not once a year, to rest.
Yeah, and I'd argue that and we should be reminded every day, because when the evening comes, I mean, how often do we don't rest, but we should be reminded every day, like, all right, this is the beginning of my day. Yesterday I did well, I did this and that, and now today I start with dinner with my family. I start with hanging out with people I care about. And then I get sleep, hopefully good night's sleep.
Yeah.
And then, like, realizing, like, your day starts there. And it should be a reminder, man, like, this is what's important. Family, friends, I would say eating together is just so key. It's a huge theme throughout the entire Bible.
Yeah, it's a sign of a covenant. Breaking bread.
Yeah.
The whole visual picture there is like they would. In order to have a covenant with someone, it's gruesome, but you would like break an animal in half and then walk through its entrails. But like the purpose of you break bread, which means you have a covenant with someone.
Yeah.
And you are associating yourself with them. That's why him inviting us to the table, that whole picture that we talked about, it means that he is communing with us in a equal. We're not equal to God, but God is saying you are important enough to sit at my table. He sits at the head, but we have this whole level playing field of where God's inviting us into his place. Like we take his yoke on, not ours.
Yeah.
We're walking with him on that journey of work. And so it's interesting too. Other thought is that very practical, but like as the sun sets, why would that not remind us of creation if we're thinking about it? Because the sun sets, what happens? There is darkness over the face of the earth. We see the lights at night. We are called to remembrance of the light be that like then light was, but the day starts with darkness, and it will then, as the day progresses, light comes in just the way God did when he created the earth.
So good, Chase. So good.
As the sun sets, we can be, creation, rest. We think about the creation story.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so good, guys. And there's so much more there. We're going to end today, but we could keep talking about this because this is, it's extremely important to us, but it's only important to us because it's important to God in the Bible.
Yeah.
And we found it, and we want to make sure people know.
These are the treasures.
These are the treasures. These are the moments. Why understanding chiasms can be so important. And so as we end every episode, Chase, please pray us out.
I'll go ahead and pray the Aaronic blessing as we end it every single time. So, Yivarechecha Adonai varishmerecha. Ya'er Adonai panav ilecha v'yikuneka. Yis Adonai panav ilecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May he make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance upon you and give you peace. Shalom, guys. Thanks for joining us. Appreciate it. Thanks for embarking on this podcast journey with us at Hyperlink. Your support means the world to us as a listener-supported podcast. If you've enjoyed our episodes and would like to contribute, please consider visiting patreon.com/hyperlinkpodcast. Stay connected with us by joining our community on Facebook at Hyperlink, a podcast journey. We value personal connections and would love to hear from you individually. You can reach out to Nigel on social media platforms under the handle @HyperlinkNigel. And don't forget to connect with Chase on Instagram at bespoke_and_bourbon. If you have any questions or would like to book us for an event, please feel free to email us at hyperlinknigel@gmail.com. Thank you once again for tuning in and being a part of the Hyperlink Collective. See you on the next episode.